So welcome back to Git presentation series. In the last presentation, we have seen how to create remote repository. We understood what is remote repository, all that stuff. But we left at a point where we just created a remote repository in the GitHub, right? But we haven't established a connection between our local repository and remote repository. After all, the main purpose of creating a remote repository is to communicate our local, store our local, whatever that is there in our local repository, store them in GitHub, that is, which is a remote repository provider. GitHub is the remote repository provider, and the repository that we create is something that we use, right? So, we haven't established a connection between our local repository and remote. So in this presentation, we will see what are the options, things that we can do. Let's go and get into the next slide. Linking local Git and remote Git. So basically, local Git means local Git repository. Remote Git means remote Git repository. So linking between a local Git and remote Git, again, we are going for GitHub, can be established in two ways, which are explained. The detailed explanation of approaches of the two approaches is done in the coming subsequent presentation. But here I'm going to talk about the approaches in high level. So basically, there are two ways you can connect local repository to remote repository. In the last presentation, we were at a place where we have a local repository of files. In the remote repository, we created another repository. In the remote host, you create another repository. So they are independent. Now we want to link them up. In order to link them, there are two approaches. One approach is creating a link from GitHub to locally. That means remote host to local host. That is approach one. So that means you pull everything from the remote host to locally first, and using that you establish a connection. That is the approach one. So this approach, the text it says the approach is used when there is no local repository exists. Yeah. So for example, the project is not your project, somebody else's project. Now you are asked to work on the project. First time you are into the project. But the project is already there. They are already working on it. There is the project is already there in GitHub. Now you join the project as a fresher. Now in that context, you don't have anything in your local thing, right? So in that case, the approach one is used. So basically, you have code and everything there in the remote repository. You don't have anything in the local. So that means you want to pull stuff from global to local. I mean remote to local. That's what pretty much what the approach one is. So what is approach two? Kind of opposite. This approach is used when local and remote repositories are already present. Only a link needs to be established. So I mean, in a way, you have local stuff. You want to establish a link between remote stuff. In this previous case, I created a remote repository with 3 files, but those 3 files are not there locally, right? So, but I have some other stuff in the local repository. In this case, I want to establish a link between local to remote. It's like kind of opposite to the approach one that I discussed a few moments ago. So that is the approach two. Actually, to be honest, approach one is easier. Just one command takes care of, git clone command takes care of linking between remote to local. Whereas approach two, again, this is not too complicated, but couple of commands we need to implement, you need to execute, which is like, in this case, like you are connecting from local to remote, right? So these are the 2 approaches. Now, once, let's say the connection is established, then what are the kind of operations which you are going to do? So we haven't discussed these operations when I talked about Git things. Again, these commands or these operations that I'm talking now in this presentation are only applicable when you have a link established between a local Git and a remote Git. That means how to communicate with remote Git from local Git, or vice versa, right? So that means how to push stuff into remote host, get stuff from remote host. Basically, this is required in a project you are working, like multiple people are working in a, and they are using GitHub as the host, as the remote Git provider. In that case, we all connected to the multiple people connected to the same GitHub repository, right? Some people add some code. Now, I want to get that code. On top of that, I want to add more code, right? Probably that's maybe the requirement. In that case, I need to get the stuff. Once I am done adding, I want to put the stuff back into the central place, right? So which is like GitHub hosted remote repository. So I need to get the stuff and put the stuff. For that, the commands we are discussing. So for getting stuff, there are two commands. One is fetch and pull. So to fetch files from remote host, like GitHub, master main of main. Basically, in GitHub, you have only main. You don't have master anymore. It's a old terminology. I think I already discussed that in the one of the previous presentation. So you get from main or from any other branch. Main is one branch, where mostly in this presentation I talk about main, but whenever required I go to the branches also. It could be from any main or any branch into local repository. Now, what is fetching? It's not merge them into local repository. How do you fetch? This is the command git fetch, and you call git fetch. It will pull stuff from remote host to local host. Now, is it really pulling stuff? Actually, not. It doesn't merge. It gets the files, but it won't store the file locally. That means if you call git fetch, you don't see anything change in your directory. But the information on the server is transferred to the local host. That means your local Git server knows that, okay, this is the version I'm at. There are other changes that happen to these files in which have been pushed into the remote host. So that knowledge you will get by calling the get fetch. You will get the knowledge of what is changed, what is modified against your local copy, but you don't get the actual thing. In order to get to fetch the files from remote host, again from main or any branch into local repository and merging them as well, we call git pull. So basically git fetch is like, just bring me the data, I will decide what to do with it. Git pull means bring me the data and apply it immediately. So basically when you call git fetch, you have a chance to understand what is changed. You say git diff, which I am going to discuss later. You see what is the difference between local and remote. That way, okay, this is required, I will pull. This is not required, I will leave it. Like that you think, right? Maybe it's a older version, you already made it better, something like that, right? So basically that's the difference between git fetch and pull. So just to summarize, between git fetch won't get the files, physical files into your local directory, but it will get the historical information of what is changed and pull those data, kept it in a place, but it won't store it locally as files, right? That's what git fetch does. Whereas git pull, it's not like that. It will pull the actual changed files, but if you have to merge them or modify them, you may have to do that, right? That's what it is. If this command, in some cases these commands error out, I will tell you what are those cases. That case is like tracking is not allowed. I will tell you what is tracking in few seconds, in few minutes. So, but if you get this error, the command we have to give is git pull origin main, or main stands for main branch or any other branch, right? Git pull origin branch name. So basically you add these two words, origin main. So basically what is tracking? Tracking is nothing but like, okay, you said git pull, right? Or git fetch. Yes, the connection is established. You know where to go. But from which branch? You haven't specified, right? And from where? You haven't specified. So basically, you are specifying that in order to get files, you need to go to main branch, make it as the origin and pull the data. That's where you specify origin main. For example, you have a different, you want to get it from a different branch. You say git pull origin branch X or branch Y or branch Z, whatever branch name is. So this is required. But you can avoid these two if tracking is set up. That means I'm going to talk about the tracking command. in a second. But once the tracking is set, you don't have to call git pull origin main or git pull origin branch X. You just say git pull or git fetch. That will take care. That means you are making it to remember, okay, this is the branch. Whenever I say git pull, you use main as the branch and get the stuff. I don't need to type again origin main multiple times. The command for that is git branch minus minus set upstream to, and then origin slash the branch name, and you specify the local branch name. If you don't specify, it is the main wherever you are currently in, right? So basically this is the git branch minus minus set upstream. What it does is, it will, upstream is the remote host, so it will link up the local branch, whatever you specify. If you don't specify, wherever you are currently in, right? Local branch with a remote branch. That's what it does. Once you do that, you can just call git pull or git push without specifying additional origin branch. I think this is clear, I guess. So this is about fetch and pull. Now push commands. Now you have modified some stuff. You want to push into the remote repository. So GitHub, you want to so then you can call git push. Similar to git pull, the same, like if the tracking information is not set. Tracking information basically is nothing but setting up the upstream, right? When it is not set, you have to call git push minus origin main. I mean minus you can remove. So origin main or git push origin branch, you can exactly similar. Basically what it does is it pushes what is already changed between your local copy and the remote copy. It will push that stuff into the remote thing, right? So basically, yeah, that's what push command is. Merge and delete. Now, when do you need to merge? You have, let's say, example cases, you have a file F, and you have some content in that. Now, you modified that file. You added more content. Somebody else also modified the file, same file F, and had a different copy of file in the remote host. Now you don't know that, right? I mean, you don't know that somebody added, it's there in the remote host. Now what you are planning to do is, okay, this is the original file, I added ABC. Now that, say in this example, you have the original file, and that guy, whoever updated that file, also has got the original file. On top of that, you added something, the other person also added a different thing. Now you want to push that. You don't want to override whatever the other person does, right? Then it's a conflict. So you have certain changes, but you don't have the changes from the other guy. So that's called a merge conflict. So in that scenario, you need to first merge those files before actually pushing to the cloud. That means you have a original file F, to which you added some content. On the same original file F, somebody else also modified and added content, but that person has pushed into the remote repository. So remote repository has a version of original file, yes, on top of that some modified by somebody else. Your local copy has got original file modified by you, but it doesn't contain what is modified. So you have to merge them. So in that context, you call git merge and the branch name. After regular push, it needs to before regular push needs to happen. So you merge that, right? So git branch minus d branch. So delete a branch. This is the command we need to give. And delete a branch on remote server, you need to call git push origin minus delete branch name. So you have to specify this origin thing. So basically merging. Whenever you call git push, you need to merge the code first. So I mean, there would be merge conflicts. You have to resolve the conflict first. Then you can push into the Git server, remote host. Right. So let's see the complete life cycle of GitHub, which is connected local to a remote host. So you have some files modified, and you put, say, git add. That put into the staging area, also known as the indexed area. So basically, we already discussed about staging area, right? So staging area is basically area where you store the files for your final review. Once the review is done, so you call git commit. That will store into your local Git repository. Git commit will store into local repository. Then you call git push. This will push to the remote repository. Now you did that. Somebody else also added some content to remote repository from some other place. So some other place. Now you want to get that stuff. You call git fetch. Git fetch doesn't get you the files. It will put the data into the like staging there into the committed place, but it doesn't fetch the actual files. You can see it's only short term. Then you call git pull. So it will actually store the files into your local file. So this is how the Git lifecycle works, right? So add, commit, push, then fetch and pull. Again, is it really necessary to call fetch before pull? May not be. I mean, most of the time, if you are cautious, you call fetch and then you look at the files. How do you look at the files? You use a git diff. That way you know what is the difference between local copy and the remote copy. Then you call git pull. But most of the time you can call git pull, but it will give you errors if you have merge conflicts. Whereas with git fetch, you can figure out that you don't need to get the errors. You will say, oh, okay, this is changed. I have to modify this. Like that you can understand, right? So that's pretty much what it is. So this is the life cycle. So this completes high level discussion about how what are the approaches where you can link between local host and remote host Git repositories. And also we talked about fetch, pull, push, delete, merge commands, right? So we'll see more about the approaches where we can link between local host and remote host in the coming presentation. Thank you.
Like, share, comment, and subscribe VNR Digital Learning Resource YouTube channel.